there's times, and I think many of you would agree with me, that we find ourselves in what I would call an unexpected crisis. There's a lot of names for that, But basically there's times where something catches us off guard. And we could be planning on being somewhere. The road could be closed. It could be an accident, It could be something simple like that. We could be showing up for a doctor's appointment, just expecting a normal, checkup and everything. And the doctor, advises us of something that we weren't prepared for. And I know in my own life sometimes, I think everything is fine, and this weird bill comes, that I didn't expect. And it's like, okay, we've changed your citizens, and, you owe us, this amount as of last week. And these happen. I mean, things like this happen. We get involved in relationships, and one day we wake up, and it's not sort of what we dreamed about and planned and prayed for. And the thing about it I want to share is successful people accept unexpected things are a part of life. They just accept this. It's a part of life. Not everything 100% of the time, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, for all of the days of our life goes as planned. And so these events that I could call like a crisis or an accident or whatever you have the name for it, they're just detours. They're detours from our original goals, our original plans. The dreams that God gave us never change. And these detours, these accidents, these unexpected, news from somebody about something. I know one of our members this week, is up in Melbourne because his uncle passed away, Joel. And it was a sudden, heart attack or stroke, and there was no time. And we've all had that story where we didn't get to say goodbye, and then someone we heard about, oh my God, is just like gone. And what I'm here to share with you today is every tragedy, every crisis, whether it's planned, which none are, but unplanned, that catch us off guard, can serve a spiritual purpose. They could be a setup for something in the future. They can build strength for what we're going to need to display or be in the future. And successful people, we're on a series talking about successful people and these small things they do that have nothing to do with money, that have nothing to do with formal education, that have nothing to do with DNA, that have nothing to do with who their parents were or weren't. There are small things successful people do that make all the difference in their life. And today, the theme is detours can be embraced and expected, and they don't change the original dreams God has placed in our heart. Successful people handle crisis. Successful people handle the unexpected. They don't run from it. They don't hide it. They're not the metaphorical ostrich burying its head in the sand, pretending they're not sitting here going, bah, 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 pretending it's not real. If I wasn't in church, I'd say something else, Stuff happens, people. Stuff happens in life. And we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And we believe in truth, and we believe in God, and we believe that God lives and moves and has its being in every one of us. We don't beg and beseech to some God out there trying to convince him that we're worthy of the answer to the prayer. No. We recognize wherever we are, God lives and moves and has his being. And so if we're in that car accident or we're detoured or we get the unexpected news, God is right there. God is right there every moment of our life when we're cognizant and aware of the presence of God. And when we spoke about successful people, we began this talking about planning. Successful people plan. And we used the metaphysics of Nehemiah, who built the walls through planning, through order, through prayer, through organization. And we use that as the metaphor, and there's that Nehemiah spirit inside each one of us. Well, today I want to recognize successful people move through the detours that show up in their lives without compromising the destination. A successful person doesn't change their plan because a detour shows up. They don't mitigate it. They don't change it from great to mediocre. They don't negotiate it down. They don't do less, expect less, be less, or create less just because a temporary detour showed up in their path. And you know, church, we do this all the time. You know we do this all the time, right? I'll give you an example. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's been a lot of road work on South Florida lately. I don't know if you've driven on Interstate 595, but you never know whether University and 595 are going to be open, closed, northbound. I don't know where the lanes are anymore. I'm at the point where I just put the car in drive, close my eyes, and hope I get to Pine Isle Road alive. I don't know what. I never know. And they're doing the same thing in Miami. They've been building this metro rail to the airport. It's built now. But while they were building it, I never knew. It's just like, and now they're building. I have news for all you Broward County people. They did this thing in Dade County where they made sun pass lanes, where you can go really fast if you pay money, and you have to go really slow if you just use the interstate. And that's basically what it is. And the funny thing about it is you can use the fast lanes for $0.25. Unless there's traffic, then they go up to like $6. And it's like, I'm not paying $6, but I'm just saying they're doing it right now. That's what all this road work is for. That's why Hollywood Boulevard has been closed. They're closing Pembroke Road next week. They're going to make these two rich people lanes who can afford $6 to get from here to Sterling Road, when there's traffic. The bottom line is detours. If I was coming to one of your houses and you live out west, some of you I know live in Plantation area, and 595 was closed, I would not say, oh, forget it, and just stand you up and forget about it and make a U-turn and drive home and just forget it. If I was going to a job and there was a car accident and I'm coming to church, remember that Sunday everything was jammed up? There was a Sunday about 2 months ago where the whole Golden Glades was closed. Cynthia comes from that direction. Sandra comes from that direction. Tim comes from that direction. I come from that direction. And we don't just say, oh, forget it. We'll do it. I'll give the sermon I was going to give today next Sunday. Every time there's a detour, we step out of our comfort zone because we planned it. We're on autopilot. We don't even pay attention 90% of the times when we're driving. We just wake up and we're here at the destination. But we don't cancel the destination because there's a little detour. We don't forget about showing up, for church because there's an accident. At least those of us who work here don't. And the best example I have metaphysically of that is the life of Joseph. The life of Joseph teaches that overcoming detours and arriving at the dream that God put in our heart is possible. Joseph was a dreamer. He was a man who had these great dreams, and he represents in every one of us the highest perception of truth when an obstacle shows up. It's really easy to sing today is the day like we did. It's really easy to see God in the situation, when we hit the metaphorical jackpot. It's really easy to be like, thank you, God, when we're blessed. My point of the matter is the same God is in our same spirit, available for the same response, thank you, God, when a detour shows up. And sometimes our first reaction, if we're true to ourselves, is this little detour, this little accident, this little, thing the doctor told us that we need to maybe take a little medicine for or take better care of us. These little things Sometimes our first response is to act and believe and behave like it's going to last forever. You know what I'm saying? Oh my God, you know what the doctor told me? And we'll just go on and on and on and on. But why don't we just end with, oh my God, period. That's my suggestion. When the crisis shows up, when the detour shows up, you go, oh my God. You know, try it. It works. Trust me. You know, ironically is when we act like the detour, the obstacle, the bad news is going to eternally, you know, have power over our life, then we avoid it. And the irony is, by delaying the handling of the crisis, we amplify the confusion it creates. By not just looking into the face of the problem and saying, you are a problem, I didn't expect you. God, how am I going to deal with this? By not just standing firm and saying, I have a dream of an education. I have a dream to educate my daughter. I have a dream of great music in my life. I have a dream to produce myself and become famous. I have a dream of health. I have a dream of prosperity. I have a dream of a happy relationship built upon love and trust and communication. That's what we need to do, and stand up and not dummy down all of those dreams because some little car accident showed up. And you know I'm talking about metaphysically a car accident. But Joseph's story is our story, church. You know, Joseph's story is ours. The events may be different, but the story of unexpected hardship can always lead to ultimate success, is every one of our stories. Just think of Joseph. I'll remind you a little bit about him. Let me think Joseph, Joseph, I can see things that my other brothers don't see. I have visions. I have dreams. They're big visions. They're big dreams. I dream about people bowing down before me. I dream about being, in power. Spirit, God, the Holy Spirit, the presence of God in me always reveals something great to me. It reveals the image of something that my mind and my spirit and my soul choose to perceive. But it's not clear. It's a vague dream. It just says, I'm destined for great things. I'm destined for holiness. I'm destined for leadership. And when I was a kid, I had two dreams. I had a dream about grain in a field. I had a dream about stars in the sky. And I realized later on, hindsight tells me that first dream represents the fields of my life, and that second dream represents the visions of in those stars, the visions of God. And I'll tell you in my life, looking back, knowing what I know, that my life and the fields of my life and the dreams that God has placed in my higher mind have collided time and time again. There have been head-on collisions, yet I always chose God. I never chose to be a victim in any of the situations that I found myself in. With each misfortune, I was thrown into the pit by my brothers. I was sold by my brothers into Egyptian slavery. I was seduced and unjustly accused by a woman and sent to prison. I was cast into prison for a crime that I never committed. But in every one of these most misfortunes, my first thought was God. And through all of those experiences, I was prepared and being prepared, but I didn't know it. I was being prepared to be the ruler of Egypt. And so all of these detours, they served as stepping stones to greater ideas that God had for my life that I didn't know about it. Let's face it, church, I want to tell you, through all of this, whatever this is for you, God is there with you. And the only difference is to recognize and remember God. That's what makes the difference in our life. We can rely on God, as we discussed a few weeks ago, as part of planning. Remember I said, step one, God. And then make the plan, whatever it is. Step one, God. This way, when we find ourselves in the metaphorical collision, when our life today and our long-term dreams have collided, we just go right back to step one and we look at that collision and we go, God! And that's all we have to do. detours are going to show up. And successful people don't get blown away by them. You could be surprised, and you could seek counsel, and I could call some close friends, but then, move through them. Even detours, we can be guided by God. We can be guided by God even through the detours. I'll tell you, if any of you think that my path to ministry was smooth, it just so happens it was 40 years. And I'm realizing a few things. 40 years. I went to the seminary 3 months after my 40th birthday. 40 years in the wilderness, church. Let me tell you. If you just don't know, and we're not going to go there today, but you just don't know, all right? We'll just leave it at that. But every one of you can stand up and repeat the statement I made. Whether you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, or 90. Every one of you could stand up and say, you just don't know what I've been through to get me to this seat. You see, when we think, we form a perception. It's only a crisis because we said we perceived crisis. And then these perceptions, which are invisible, but they're no different than, let me just say, the Play-Doh that children create. Little animals in school with. The perception molds ideas and creates our life. Something happens. Here's an example. And our first thought is, this is a good thing. Our feeling and our thinking nature, our spirit and our soul, God in us, and our intelligence, just blurt out, this is a good thing. We've created the thing as good. At that very moment, we have created something good in our life. Because our perception, our thought, our feelings, our intellect, in other words, all of the power we have to pray, has now declared this is a good thing. We think it's a bad thing at that initial, realization, and we have created a bad thing. Successful people create good things out of bad circumstances all the time. Good or bad is only the thought we think. We create it, then we think good, and we can vibrate good. We can attract good. You ever have a great day when you're feeling great, and all of a sudden just attract serendipitous people and circumstances, and it just makes the day better and better and better. By faithfully, moving through our day, thinking good, we become a magnet for good. And the opposite is true. The opposite is true. By faithfully thinking this is bad, it gets bad and worse. You ever notice, like they say tragedy comes in threes? Well, where do you think we attract it? It sort of makes sense. Some of those old metaphors and those old sayings, they make sense. And so our faith, I want to tell you, our faith has just as much power to declare this is a crisis and have our whole life fall apart as it does to declare this is a blessing. I don't know how, but somehow this is going to bless me in my life. And the power moves through us in the moment of crisis. Our faith can be more powerful when the detour shows up than when everything is working out great in our life. Because that's when our faith has the power to transform our mind. And when we transform our mind, we transform our thoughts. And when we transform those thoughts, we transform our life. It's that simple. And so I invite you to realize, to really, really realize, we are able to embrace detours that show up along the way. And that the minute we embrace them and declare God, we have beat the adversary, whatever it is. We may have to go through a few stuff. The psalm that everyone knows says, yea, that I walk through the valley of shadow of death, and I shall fear no evil. The key is motion. I walk through. Yea, that I walk through the crisis, I shall fear no evil. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to give it power. I'm not going to, back down. I'm not going to dummy down my dreams. I'm going to embrace the dream that God gave me, for my family, for my life, for my goals. This week, if a detour shows up, I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to blow through it. I'm going to jump over it. I'm going to dig under it. I'm going to sneak around it. Or I'm just going to punch right through it metaphysically. But I am not going to be held back by a detour when God says I am meant to live and create this destination. This is my message to you today. It's very simple. This is my message, to embrace the detours, to not let them stop you, to move through them, and to declare God. Because when we speak God right to them, you know what's going to happen most of the time? Tim, come on up. You know what's going to happen most of the time when we speak to these detours? They're going to be invisible and fall apart. When we speak to obstacles and say, you're not real, they're invisible and fall apart. When we think people have power over us to hold us back in work or in relationships or stuff, no, we've given them that power, and we just say, no, go to God. Go to God. You can't touch me. Nobody can push my button, you know what I mean? Because my button been shorted out, 15 years ago. Like, there ain't nobody in this world that can push this button because we are children of God. Okay, we give away the button. It's like, and say, here, push me. So in this day, let us begin the week knowing that the knowledge of God and the Spirit of Christ is always there. Let us remember our faith is even more powerful in the moment of a crisis than probably in our happiest moments. Let us look beyond any temporary obstacles that are showing up and see ourselves on the other side, however God makes that happen. Let us never sell down the dreams that God has given us because of some little detour that shows up in today. Let us agree with the highest and best and say, this and even more God has declared over my life. Let's agree with God today, church. Give it up. Let's agree with God today, church.